Welcome to Riding the Trauma Train, or welcome back if we've shared this space before. I'm Lydia, your host and fellow passenger in this journey of self-healing, inner strength and personal growth. This podcast is a safe, judgment-free space dedicated to the realities of living with and healing from trauma. Through personal stories and in-depth conversations with special guests, including therapists, healers, practitioners, and fellow survivors, we look at what healing can truly look like in everyday life. We explore realistic healing journeys and share simple, sustainable practices and actionable tools to support your well-being along the way. So grab your ticket, take a seat, and remember you are not on this journey alone. Today, we are joined by Caroline, an NHS nurse and menopause coach. Caroline will talk us through not only the trials and tribulations of menopause, which we are all going to hit at some point in our life, but when Caroline started going through this, she lost both her parents. So she's going to talk us how she navigated through that time. So grab your ticket, take a seat, and remember, you do not have to travel this journey alone. Caroline, welcome to this episode of Riding the Trauma Train.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So, little bit of background. Caroline and I, we met a few years ago. Again, Boston Tea Party.
Yeah.
Sing to Heal. Ironically, I think there's a lot of women in there that are of an age, either starting menopause, going through menopause, or have gone through menopause.
Yeah.
So can you please tell me your journey? When did you first start noticing things?
So it's kind of a couple of stages. I would say the first stage, I didn't know it was. Now I look back, I can see that it was. I realised later on. But the very, very first stage, I would say I noticed some joint pain, like all over joint pain, just body aching, feeling like you're 90, getting out of bed in the morning, and just everything feeling stiff. And so because I didn't have any inkling that it was perimenopause, I hadn't even considered that. I was only 44 at the time, and we were in COVID at the time. We'd come through the worst sort of first bit, and I'd had COVID, so I thought it was COVID. And then I went to see the doctor, and I got referred to rheumatology, and they told me it was fibromyalgia. And I was like, okay. So I went away thinking, well, this is what this is. But the more I investigated it, the more it didn't feel right. And then when I went back a year later, because at that point I was just told, there's nothing we can do about that. Just go and do some yoga, and just get on with things, basically. And so I did the yoga. And but it just didn't feel like the right thing. And then I went back for my review, and I said to him, like, this doesn't feel like fibromyalgia. I've gone on to lots of sites to listen to other people's stories. It just doesn't feel like this is what is going on for me. And then he said, I think you might, by that point I was 45. And he said, oh, well, maybe you're tipping into perimenopause. That could be what's causing this. And, at that point he suggested some HRT. And so I diligently went on the HRT, and I think it wasn't really until maybe a year or so after that I really started noticing what I would have considered to be perimenopause changes. And that was cycle changes. Things with my mood were changing dramatically. Anxiety was starting to creep in. I was having problems sleeping. I was having these incredible rage episodes, mostly directed at my family, because I think do that as the people you feel safest with. It was over ridiculous things. I remember, I can't remember what it was about. It was something very nothingy, something wasn't put away properly, or something like in the drawer, or something crazy.
The dishwasher wasn't emptied.
Blowing up completely and having to leave the house. I was that enraged, I had to, and I'd never done that ever in my whole life, just walked out of my family home, and luckily I'd gone into nature, so that calmed me down.
Nice.
And I took a really long walk and came back and felt, but then I felt really guilty and terrible that I'd had this rage episode, and that was all of that kind of built into how I felt, in myself. I felt, as terrible mum, terrible partner, because I couldn't control my emotions very well. So there was a lot of things all happened that made me think, this is more. But it's even then, even being a nurse, even understanding women's health, it took a lot for me to understand that this was actually perimenopause for me. I was still individually thinking, well, there's this thing going on, and then there's this thing going on, and kind of
Yeah.
medicalizing it and saying, well, and going down lots of different routes to get little different things investigated. But not at any one point did anyone medical say to me at this point, that these are perimenopause symptoms, and you are really fully going into perimenopause at this point. So it took a while to put all the pieces together. Yeah.
So how long was that process then, from the time that you were like, okay, I do think that this is what it is, from the time you first kind of went to the doctor and said, what's going on?
It's hard to remember now, but I think so. When I first started really having those quite severe symptoms, I think probably at that point, it was probably the menstrual cycle things that I was having the most problems with. So that was being addressed by the doctor. And I was already on HRT because I knew I needed it for my joints. But I think nobody kind of really said, this is
Married the
actually
two up.
perimenopause now. I think I thought I was already in it because I'd, started the HRT, and actually I shouldn't be that bad, because I was on HRT, and how could I possibly
Yeah.
be still having all these incredible symptoms? I was on quite low dose HRT, to be fair, but it probably took the whole period of going through that, I would say, was probably about 2 years
It's a
of
long
just
time, isn't
going
it?
through this real
Yeah.
turmoil kind of period of life. Had a huge impact on my relationship and just lots of things, But I was also, nice to be mentioned, going through grief process as well. So there was a lot of it was very confusing. I didn't know what was grief, what was menopause. And I think a lot of my, say, like my psychological symptoms, so my anxiety and depression, were put down to the grief by doctors and myself. So it was kind of, I wasn't really sure what was causing what. So it was it was a very confusing time.
Take us to the time. Obviously, you're going through all these symptoms of perimenopause, but then obviously you lose one of your parents, and then you lose another parent in quite close
Yeah.
succession. That's what, even losing one parent is traumatic enough. To lose two whilst trying to navigate these hormonal symptoms, I suppose. Talk me through your grief response, or talk me through how you kind of navigated that trauma in your life.
So yeah, so the difference it was about 3.5 years between my parents passing away. So my dad sadly died in 2019. He'd had dementia. So we had that sort of anticipatory grief that comes with that, and the loss of him as he was, deteriorating with his dementia. And he died actually before I had any of these perimenopause symptoms start. But it was very shortly afterwards that the joint pains and things started. And then we had, probably a year or so, and then my mum started to get quite unwell as well. But the real crux point for me, for the grief and the trauma, I think, that it caused, was a combination of things. So not only was I having a lot of really severe perimenopause symptoms, I also changed jobs, which was probably the worst thing I probably could have done.
Mm.
I moved from a job that I'd been doing for about 8 years as a practice nurse into a completely new speciality. And something happened, something changed in my perimenopause symptoms around that time. My mum was still alive at this point, but she was getting quite unwell. And that's when all the symptoms suddenly got a lot worse. I was under quite a lot of stress. And then I started this new job. But within 2 weeks of that, my mum got really, really sick, and she was taken into hospital. We'd had several episodes where she'd gone into hospital, but this time seemed more serious, and the prognosis was not looking really very good. And so I was literally 2 weeks into this job, and everything was just turned upside down, and I was having to travel to and fro. My parents' house was 100 miles away from where I live, so I was up and down every weekend. But very quickly, it was found that she was, end of life, and she had heart failure. And so we were going through this process of, of helping her just, have the kind of death that she wanted, where she wanted to be at home. So we, obviously facilitate as much that as possible. But it was just, I think, having so much pressure. And what happened was, I think, my symptoms from perimenopause wise just went absolutely haywire. So I was struggling with a lot of anxiety, lots of self-esteem issues. I was really struggling to get into the job that I was doing at all. Everything just felt too overwhelming. But when my mum actually passed away, the things I think I did to support, well, I mean, it was really hard. I don't know if I did support myself very well at the beginning, to be honest. And I just felt everything just collapse on me, really, because I think I just ended up with too many things happening at once. So I was, trying to be this new person in a job. I felt a lot of guilt around the fact I'd interviewed for a job and felt like a completely different person
Mm.
to the person that I was when I eventually started, because it was like a 3-month notice period I had to give. And I felt like I almost cheated a little bit, like I'd given them the wrong person. This is not
Yeah.
who they got in the actual job. And I was this confident, excited person, start the job and interview, and I came and everything in my life just seemed to be falling to pieces. And I was just not that person. I was not confident. I was scared to do things that I'd been doing for 10 years clinically. I was scared to take on new things. I had an incredibly bad episode of flooding at work, menstrual flooding, and that caused me to just really not want to do any patient facing role at all. So I got really, really anxious, and I've never ever felt anxiety like that before. And I wasn't, again, everyone was mostly putting it down to the grief. But I think a lot of this was also stemmed in the perimenopause symptoms being driven much worse by the cortisol and stress that I was experiencing, because of the fact I was trying to be this brilliant nurse, but also just crumbling completely underneath it all, trying to cope with having lost my mum and not really being over the loss of my dad, obviously never really over it. But I mean, I was still navigating that grief, and actually it brought all the grief of my dad up again by losing my mum. So it
Yeah.
almost like I felt like I was double grieving with my mum,
Yeah.
because I suddenly felt all that pain that I'd kind of buried, I kind of got past that sort of initial kind of trauma feeling of losing a parent. And but then when I lost my other parent, I suddenly felt, really alone, really, you know, I had nobody, I've got sisters. But there's something
Yeah.
about losing your parents and being, that feeling of being orphaned, being like, I haven't got those two really important people in my life anymore. And
Yeah.
that felt really significant. And I think, and it created a sort of second round of grief for my dad, as well as trying to obviously grieve my mum as well. So it was just too much. I ended up actually having to leave my job. I made a decision just to step out of nursing. So the navigation I did really was that I had to almost shut myself down a little bit to rebuild myself back up again, because I got to the point where I was about to burn out, I think. So I was like, something has to give. And the only thing that could give was my job. And so I made a really difficult decision to stop nursing. And, at that point, I'd been nursing for about 18 years consistently. I'd, only stopped to have children a couple of times. And I love my job. Like, nursing was, if somebody had said to me, what is the one thing, really, of your life that you just absolutely love, it was my job. I loved nursing. So it was a really big wrench to make that decision, but it felt like it was the right decision, and it was the only decision I could do at the time.
Wow. There's a few things. So, sounds like from what you've just said, somebody that is going through perimenopause. I also find it difficult. This is off a tangent, but I find it difficult to navigate the fact that everyone says perimenopause now and then menopause. It's like, are you either in it or are you not?
So yeah,
Go on. Well, let's do that one
a
first,
little
because
bit of
that.
menopause education. So basically, you've got premenopause, which is the time when your reproductive years and you're before you go into perimenopause. And in theory, your cycle should be nice and regular if you haven't got anything like PCOS or endometriosis or something. But then you move into perimenopause. So that's that time where the hormones are all fluctuating. So the estrogen and progesterone up and down, they're not doing what they're supposed to. Testosterone maybe slowly creeping down. And that can be anywhere between sort of 2 and 15 years, but the whole process, it takes years. A lot of it, beginnings of it, we probably wouldn't notice that dramatically, but as we move into it, we get a lot of this more chaos that happens. Then you hit a moment in time, so just one day in time where you hit menopause. So we tend to bracket everything with the word menopause, but menopause is just one day. So if you've gone 12 consecutive months without any bleeding at all, and that means nothing. Like, so even if you've gone for 11 months, you've not bled, and then you spot slightly on the 12th month, you haven't done 12 consecutive months. So 12
Okay.
consecutive months with no bleeding, if you can obviously assess your bleeding, not everybody can, then you've
Hmm.
hit menopause. And then after that day, you are forever postmenopausal. But the word postmenopause is also a little bit confusing because we never really post. You are
Like
just
25.
menopausal for the rest of your life. So so most women will still have symptoms for maybe 5-10 years after they hit postmenopause. And then hopefully when they're sort of 60s, 70s, most women are mostly non-symptomatic or very slightly symptomatic.
Is that non-symptomatic would mean that like hormones have kind of
Almost, it's
balanced?
kind of leveled out. So obviously, if someone's an HRT, then that's going to be slightly different because they're getting that replacement. But if you're looking at someone whose natural menopause has just gone through the whole process, they've got something called estradiol, which is the estrogen that's produced by our ovaries. And obviously, your ovaries are shutting down, and then your body produces another kind of estrogen called estrone. And that is not as strong as estradiol. So even though the body can function, it just doesn't function as well. So the brain
Mm.
has to get used to this new kind of estrogen that's just not as potent as the one it's been used to the rest of its life. And it has to just work with that. And so it takes some time for your body to adapt, your brain to adapt to those changes. And you've got estrogen receptors all over your bodies. That's why we get whole body symptoms. So, and then once it's sort of got used to it, everything's got down to the lowest levels, progesterone's dropped down as well, testosterone's dropped down. We go back to a sort of almost more like the state we were in before we went through puberty, in the sense of a hormone. So everything's just a bit more calm and settled. And we go back to being in those circadian rhythms again, rather than having that 28-day, 32-day cycle rhythm of hormones. Everything's just kind of, leveled out, but at a much lower level.
Well, thank you for that, because I don't know if anybody else that's going to listen to this is going to be like everyone's, because I keep hearing perimenopause. I'm in my early 40s and people keep talking about perimenopause and in my head it almost seems like it's a new word because people have been saying menopause for so long. Now it's perimenopause. So I didn't, but yeah. Anyway, thank you for clearing that up.
That's all right.
Mm. What my actual question was before that one slapped me in the face was with regards to the stress that you were going through, the grief, and then obviously the perimenopause symptoms. From what you've described, would you say that the symptoms were aggravated or exaggerated from going through the grief and the stress?
Absolutely, like without a doubt. Once I removed some of the stress from my life, so the one thing I knew I could control, which was to remove my job. My job was quite highly stressful. It was demanding, and it was clearly causing me a lot of anxiety because I just wasn't in a mind frame to cope with it. So removing that instantly supported me. But then I also needed to do a lot of work through counseling and coaching myself to work out how to reduce my stress levels. So definitely cortisol is a robber of it's like the thief of sex hormones in a sense. So the more you are under stress, the more your body will not produce those hormones because it's much busier producing cortisol and adrenaline because it thinks you're in this constant fight or flight. You need to be constantly ready to fight and to do get rid of that saber-toothed tiger thing. So
Yeah.
it would be doing that. That's the focus of the body. Whereas, so the hormones that, so even though you may be naturally going through some diminishing of the hormones, it's worse. You're having even less of the hormones that you need because you're just not getting any produced by the adrenal glands or anything like that elsewhere. So it's always like a double whammy.
Analogy of a train. We're on riding the trauma
Mhm.
train. Well, it's like you're on the track and someone's pulled the thing back. You've got both wheels going forward, but one's going really fast and one's trying to slow you down. You're kind of doing,
Yeah.
oh, I don't know if I can do that. This forwards and backwards thing. That does make sense. But I think the way you described what you went through, there will be so many people that can relate to that.
Mm.
My only pickle is that obviously you as much as it was a hard decision, you were in a position where you could leave your job. I know a couple of people that are going through perimenopause at the moment, and their job is horrendously stressful, and they can't leave that because
Yeah.
that's like their lifeline. But I think if it is something that is going to be going on for a number of years. Did you see my face drop when you said 2 to 15? I literally, my jaw just dropped. But like 15 years, you don't want to be, you don't want to have those symptoms exacerbated, those levels. What would you say to somebody that was highly stressed and they were going through, obviously they may not be going through grief, but you do get, unfortunately, you do get to that time in your life, don't you, when you are older. And if you're going through perimenopause, that means your parents are older.
Yeah.
So, or you could lose a friend or even lose a job maybe. But if there's
All sorts of things. Yeah.
somebody's going through stress, what would you kind of say to them to try and ease that in order to try and ease the menopause symptoms?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, like you was mentioning, we're in that sandwich generation when you hit perimenopause. You've got often people have got kids they're supporting, and then they've got elderly relatives, they've got high level jobs, they've worked really hard to get to whatever level they're in a job, or they've just got a highly stressful life. There's a lot going on, isn't there? So much can happen at this point in our lives, and we are often the ones kind of holding it all together. So stress wise, the most, sleep is really, really important. So really creating a focus on good sleep is really, really important. So trying to do all the things that you can do to uh, improve that, so thinking about how, even from how you wake up, so your routines around your sleep. So creating the same time you wake up every day, the same time you go to bed. Um, we tend to have that thing at the weekend, we'll stretch it out a bit longer. It's actually not great for our bodies. But also getting daylight first thing in the morning, setting that circadian rhythm is really, really important. So getting your sun, get the light on your eyes so your brain knows that it's the morning and sets that properly, because what happens naturally should be that, so as we need cortisol. Cortisol is not the enemy, it's there for a reason. It's there to support us to wake up in the morning. So it should be high first thing in the morning, and then it should be slowly petering off as the day goes on, and we have another hormone that rises and that makes us sleepy. But often the stress is chronic, and that cortisol doesn't go down. And by the time we get to bed, it's still high. So doing things that will support your cortisol dropping throughout the day. So firstly, setting that circadian rhythm is really, really important. So how we wake up is just as important for our sleep as how we set up going to sleep at night. So, and then you want to be thinking about how to reduce your stress levels during the day. So are there things that you can be doing that can support yourself? So it might be that you find ways during your day to make a bit of time for some breath work, or just being conscious of when you're feeling stressed, taking a bit of time out in another space just for a few minutes if you're able to, just to kind of calm those that nervous system down. And also then setting yourself up well in the evening, so you do have that wind down time properly, where you're, looking at, are you shutting off screens? Are you doing high energy exercise stuff before you go to bed and things like that? So it's like just getting yourself in a sleep state, and then having good routines to get yourself sleeping. So sleeping's really, really key. I mean, that will bring your cortisol down if you get good sleep, but it can, if it's raised, it can be the thing that's waking you up and stopping you sleeping. So it is a challenge
Yeah.
to get that balance. But yeah, so trying to find ways to calm the nervous system down, switching it off. So things like doing breath work are really, really good, because that can actually switch off your nervous system into the rest and digest state. By doing things like really simple ones I use is, that hold your breath, take a breath in for like the count of 4, breathe out for the count of 6. Just having that um, extended exhale can just really
Yeah.
calm the nervous system down, and you can use that as a way just to settle yourself when you're going to sleep, or even during the day when you're having a
I was going to say
stressful
you
period.
could do that anywhere, couldn't
Use it
you? That's
anywhere.
really,
Yeah, the
yeah,
beauty of breath is it's always there for you.
yeah.
You always have it on you. So it's fantastic. It's a really good tool, and I've used it a lot. It's one of
Mm.
my go-to things if I'm struggling with anxiety or
Especially the
stress.
out breath.
It's the out breath that does
Yeah.
the sort of cleansing of the sort of, gets the calming part of
In
it.
with the
That's what
good,
supports you.
out
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
rubbish.
Or even just saying, just concentrating on the breath itself, paying
Hmm.
attention to it. But yeah.
I So I've got a question. So this is there, with all the symptoms we go through, what that we've got, there's hot flushes, there's anxiety, there's depression. I think some people get acne, don't they? So it's like, is
Yeah.
there something like that? So, but with all those symptoms that you went through with your perimenopause, um, is there any way of telling the difference between grief and the perimenopause, or were they so similar?
I mean, obviously the physical symptoms, just in most part, I think, they were perimenopause, but they were exacerbated by grief, I think. The psychological symptoms are the one that are harder to differentiate, I think, between
Yeah,
what's grief. But ultimately, I don't think it really matters to know what it is. It's more about what you do with those symptoms to support yourself. We're all going to have things that happen in our lives that we can't avoid. We can't avoid that people in our lives pass away. We can't avoid that we
yeah.
might go through a horrible divorce, or we might have a job that's really, really stressful, that, we can't always get rid of those things. So we just have to find ways to support ourselves through those things. But it's quite hard to see that when you're in it sometimes.
Absolutely. You're in that bubble. Well, that actually leads me very, very nicely on to my next question. So from this, you decided to leave nursing, which I know from my background is a very, very hard thing to do. And you've gone from that, you have actually started unmenopaused.
Yeah.
So, which is amazing. So that would mean you've trained to be a menopause coach specialist, or what?
Yeah.
How do you
I
describe
started
yourself?
I started off training as a menopause champion, so just really learning and understanding about menopause and then sharing that knowledge. So I started on menopause as a Facebook group, and then I started some support groups locally and just wanted to share what I'd learned, really. But then I was at that point where I was like, because when I left nursing, it was never intended to be long term. It was meant to be a break. And I got to that point at sort of 6 months having been away, and then thinking the maximum I was going to take off was a year, and then I was going to go back. But every time I thought about going back, I thought, oh, it just doesn't feel like the right thing to do. And it didn't feel like the path I was meant to be on. And I was really, really wanting to support women in menopause, how I'd been able to learn for myself how to support myself. And so I trained as a menopause coach on top. Then I thought, well, I can use those consultation skills I have from nursing to then adapt that into a coaching program, and then learn how to coach, because that's different to nursing. As nurses,
Yeah,
we advise and we, mentor and we support, but we don't. Coaching is a different thing altogether. So I needed to understand that skill of how to coach somebody, but then using that knowledge that I'd gained to then create that program that I can support people with. So that's kind of, so I've got two things. I do education and I do coaching. So I use the champion side to do workshops and talks and things and do webinars. And then the coaching is one-to-one or in small groups. So I can support people more individually and create that program to help them work through all those little changes that they can make that will support them through the perimenopause.
amazing. So the workshops and things, is that like corporate that you go around and speak to
Yeah, it's
companies?
still early days. I've been doing some stuff with care homes predominantly most recently. Obviously my background's, healthcare. I really want to support people in the health sector. They, lots of jobs obviously are really highly stressful, but obviously they're giving a lot of themselves to everybody around them all the time. And it's very easy to get lost amongst that. And also they often have difficult uniforms to deal with, to
Uh-huh.
wear, and the hot flushes are even worse. So trying to be able to support that sector's really, a passion of mine. I've done some stuff with some schools as teachers. But yes, also getting into the corporate sector, because, 1 in 10 women leave their jobs. It's not actually, that's a crazy number,
That is a crazy number.
because they just aren't supported, they're not coping, and so there's going to be lots of changes in legislation and stuff around corporate businesses as to how they have to support women in menopause. And I think it's coming in 2026, and then it's going to be mandatory in 2027 to have like a menopause action plan in place. So it's
It's
really,
not like,
in
yeah,
their
sorry.
interest, businesses to get people in like myself to do talks and support and help them learn how to support their staff. So
Exactly. It's not like it's gonna go away. It's literally, and I think also, like, you think we're in 2025 and more women are going into corporate jobs, more women are staying in jobs for a very, very long time. It's not like in the 50s when you 50s, 60s, 70s, you may have worked and then you had kids and then
Mm.
you didn't go back to work. So you worked through
Yeah.
everything at home. We are in the workplace when all these things happen. I do think it's really important because, like you say, you're in this job and you can't think straight. You can't think straight. You can't take on tasks. Now, you could have been in that job for a very long time, yet you can't string a sentence together. Or you're in a meeting and you get that massive thing of brain fog and you can't. So from your perspective, it's emotionally draining and making you feel like you are actually going crazy. From a company perspective, they're looking at you, well, clearly you're not performing the same as you used to. So they see it as a performance issue when actually it is unintentional and you can't help it. It's literally something you can't help.
Yeah, and it could be that there's some small reasonable adjustments could make a massive difference to that person in the workplace. It doesn't have to be hugely expensive things that they need to do. It's just about having awareness, and if it's brain fog or it's memory issues, it maybe they just need a bit more time. They need some cues or something to kind of help them remember things. I live by my calendar. I can't remember anything unless it's written in my calendar. And just having a little bit of what's the right word?
Compassion.
Yeah, compassion for somebody if they're clearly struggling to like remember
Mm.
somebody's name, or just they're losing their train of thought, rather than making that person feel belittled or whatever because they're not performing the way they were before. Then it's or pulling them up on it. It's actually being understanding and going, actually, this is just something that's happening, and it's a transitional phase. This is not going to be
Yeah.
forever. Most women, a lot of the symptoms disperse, as we go through it. So it's not a permanent change. It's just that they're going through this change and they need some support while they're going through it.
And I suppose having that support, you're keeping your stress levels down, which means it's not going to exacerbate the symptoms, which then means you're going to perform better at work. Whereas if you flip it on its side, if you don't get that support at work, you're going to get even more stressed, which
Yeah,
is going to make your symptoms even worse. So there is much as it's crazy to say, there is a balance of managing them, but you need to be able to be in a position where you can do that and have the people around you to help you.
definitely. And awareness is the biggest thing, because I think if you're more aware of, if the business is more aware, they can be more supportive. But it just means that, it avoids women feeling like they can't say what's happening, because often women will say, well, they'll call in sick, but they'll say that it's something else. They won't say it's
Mm.
menopause related. But then, so if they feel that they can be open and say that this is what's happening for me today, it opens up that conversation where they can be, feel more safe to have that, to say what they
Mhm.
need to say, and not be, making things up and having to feel guilty that they're off sick for something that they haven't really been true about.
And it's not a sickness, is it, really?
No,
As in
this is the thing.
sickness from work, it's just life.
Yeah,
And regardless of who you are as a woman, you're gonna go through it. When that is, no one will know until obviously you start going through it. If you're someone that believes that you may be going through it, what would be the steps that they would need to take?
so they're starting to get some symptoms.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, I think the first step you should do is write down what you're experiencing. So with all my clients, I give them a symptom checker sheet, and as you know, we now know there's like 37 recognized symptoms, or 34, I think 34 recognized symptoms, but there's like 84 like reported. So there's lots and lots of symptoms, but I give them a chart which has got a large majority of those symptoms on, and they can tick that off. And that helps when you go and see a GP, or you want to talk to somebody at work about it, or you want to express it's really the whole picture of what you're experiencing. It helps make it clearer, and it shows that holistic experience, because it's not just one symptom that makes you feel a certain way. It's often lots of symptoms. So that helps people to get, if they're going to their GP, you only get that 10 minutes appointment to really get across what you're experiencing. It really helps to just get them to understand the whole picture. And yeah, seek support, go and learn stuff, understand about menopause, because I think it just makes a huge difference if you understand and you know what is causing potentially the symptoms that are happening. I think we're much better when we know what something is than if we're dealing with the unknown. So
Hmm.
the more understanding you have of menopause, I think the better it will be for women. And I think that's what hopefully is going to help generations before us. I think the biggest thing that we've been finding in this generation and generations before is they've just been blindsided by it because nobody talked about it. Nobody was ready. Nobody told you that this was going to happen. Everyone thought, I, I'm going to be in my 50s and it's only hot flushes anyway. So what's the worry? But actually nobody told you that it was going to be all these multitude of symptoms. It was going to have this massive effect on the way you are able to live your life for some people, not for everybody, obviously. I think if we had more knowledge, that it makes so much difference. I think for younger women coming through, I think it will be better because they will have much more knowledge and they'll be prepared better.
Yeah, I also think though, from thinking of it from riding the trauma train perspective, what's really difficult is that there are a lot of symptoms that display, I suppose, from perimenopause, complex PTSD and PTSD. There are so many things that kind of interlink or could probably mask what you think would be perimenopause if you were
Yeah,
going through PTSD symptoms.
yeah.
And maybe even vice versa. I think it's definitely something that my listeners should look into if they feel that perimenopause is one of the things that they are going through, or if they're going through trauma, or they're having a trigger that maybe actually it won't be a trigger. Maybe it is the start of something. I know you're local to Salisbury,
Mhm.
so if you do support meetings, can you let us know when they are?
So yeah, I've got two. I've got a daytime one, which is the first Friday of every month, from 10 till 12, and that's at the Everyman Cinema. We've got a little snug room at the side. And then I also do one in the evening, which is called the Menopause Mingle, which is also at the Everyman Cinema, and that is the fourth Tuesday of every month, and that is 7 till 9 p.m. So yeah, you can find me
Amazing.
there every month.
Do you have, I know you've got an Instagram at the moment, that's at unmenopaused.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Do you have a website or an email address where anyone can get
I
hold of you?
do. I have a website which is unmenopause.co.uk, and my email is unmenopaused@gmail.com. And I'm also on Facebook as well, under Unmenopaused as well. And there's a private group there as well. So for more interactive discussions and stuff, people can say what they want to say on there. So as long as it's
Yeah, and I
appropriate.
suppose even if you're somebody that is doesn't think, if you're in your mid 30s or if you're in early 30s and you don't think you're going through it yet, you can still make contact because actually it will come. It will be
Yeah,
there at
yeah,
some point.
absolutely. Yeah, I
Knowledge
have
is
people in
power.
my group. Yeah, I have people in my group who are in their 30s, and often, it's not just natural menopause. We do have obviously people who've gone through hysterectomies or
Hmm.
cancer treatments, which mean they've got medically induced menopause, and which is often worse if someone's been slammed straight
Yeah.
into menopause. So that in itself is pretty traumatic. You've gone through major surgery or you've gone through a cancer experience, and then you've now suddenly thrown into instant menopause as well. So
Yeah.
we have women who come to my group who have experienced that and are also going through the difficulty of being in early menopause and people not understanding anything about it. And how could you possibly be
Yeah.
going through menopause? You're only in your 30s. So,
Yeah.
and the friends around them, there's no peer support because they just don't get it. They're
Well,
not there. So
oh,
those
wow.
women are really finding it, very helpful to be
Beneficial.
around other
Yeah.
people who are experiencing, even if their experiences is a natural one, but they are getting to meet people who've gone through that same experience, a very similar experience to them, and finding those people to connect to who can just go, oh, okay, you get it. Like you're going through this too.
Well,
Really,
that
really
is a
powerful.
blessing.
Yeah.
That it
That's
really is. And I think what it is, it's I feel like it's almost we're holding hands. Like we all need to like, it's like a one big female hug. I love
Yeah.
it. Is there anything before we kind of wrap up? Is there anything that you would say to somebody's partner, whether that be male, female, or indifferent, if they have a partner that's going through the perimenopause, how can they support them?
Go and educate yourself, I think, is really the most important thing. Like, understand what they might be going through. My husband had to do that. He had to really educate because we were going through a lot of difficulty with our relationship as a result of perimenopause and the things that were going on in our lives. And the biggest thing that he did was go and understand. So when we did have the conversations, he it was coming from, I didn't have to tell him everything. Like
Mm,
he already had some understanding of what was going on. Um, so I think, and just be compassionate, be open to listening, and you know, knowing that this is a transition. This isn't forever. You will, and
yeah.
often hear, if people start HRT, that their partners will say, "I've got my partner back again." It
Mm,
feels like they're losing somebody. So also being compassionate to themselves as well, because they are going through a loss process often, or a rejection process, which depending what's happening in the relationship. So they have stuff to deal with themselves in that
mm,
relationship. Um, so it's being compassionate and having that communication still is really, really key. Because I think if you
amazing.
stop communicating, that's when resentment builds up, and that can really destroy a relationship. So all of those things will support the couple to
To move through
stay
it
strong and
together.
stay together through it. And
Yeah.
yeah, just knowing that this is not forever. They will, things will get better. They do. That person does need support through this. It's a tough time of life.
Okay. I have one final question for you, please. The conductor's question is, think of the earlier you at the start of this ride through menopause and change. If you could sit next to her on that train, what would you want her to know?
I think I would want her to know that it's all going to be okay. You are going to get through this. Your body is not falling to pieces. It's just going through a bit of a big change, but it does feel like your body's falling apart. It's not. It's still okay, and it's still going to function. And there's lots of life after this. So, hang in there, I think is probably what I would say.
That's amazing. And I cannot thank you enough for coming on and sharing your story with us.
That's
A
all right.
story with us. I'll delete that bit out. I'll try to anyway. Okay, so if anyone's got any questions, then please pop them in the comments box below. Remember to subscribe, like, share. I'm rubbish at this. Subscribe, like, and share. And I'm sure if you are not the person going through perimenopause at the moment, but you know someone that is, then please share this with them. They could really benefit from everything that Caroline said. Once you've listened to the episode, if you want to go and contact her, obviously there are the lovely groups with your peer supporters and the one-to-one coaching. If you want to contact me, if you want to have any questions on the podcast, or if you want me to cover anything, then I'm on Instagram at Riding the Trauma Train, Facebook and TikTok. Thank you very much. Until next time. Thank you so much for joining me today on Riding the Trauma Train. I'm Lydia and I feel privileged to share this space with you. No matter where you are on this train right now, whether it's in survival mode, slowly finding your feet in recovery, or maybe it's somewhere in between, remember you are not alone in what you're feeling and you do not have to travel this journey by yourself. So if you'd like to continue traveling together, please follow Riding the Trauma Train wherever you're listening so you can join us at the next stop. Until next time, take care.